Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The first sound Seren Caldwin heard after 8 silent years was the crack of bones as someone slammed her to the stone floor. Cold torchlight flickered across the throne room of the Iron Keep, dust drifting like pale ash through the air. Ravian's soul crest, the Alpha King, stood above her, tall and shadowed in a cloak of black wolf fur, his golden eyes glowing with furious disbelief. Seren's throat burned, not from the blow, but from terror. She had been dragged in front of every noble, every warrior, every voice she had tried to avoid. "You lied," Ravian said, his voice low enough to shake her ribs. Seren's heart hammered. She tasted blood from where she bit her tongue to remain silent. She had trained herself to never make a sound, not even when struck. But tonight, Ravian had heard her whisper a word she never meant to speak. For 8 years she survived by pretending she could not speak, not even whimper. It kept her invisible, safe, unclaimed. If a girl in the Wolflands could not speak, she was considered broken, unworthy to be chosen as a mate or political pawn. That lie had saved her life once. She remembered the night her father had looked at her and whispered, "Seren, never speak again, no matter what they do." That night their home burned. That night her mother died. Seren never cried, never screamed, never called for help. She endured punishments in silence. They slapped her, kicked her, called her useless, and she remained empty of sound. They thought she was nothing. And nothing was safe. Until tonight, when a single word escaped her. "Stop!" Ravian paced in front of her like a caged storm. 8 years, he said. 8 years pretending to be mute in my lands. Nobles whispered, scandal blooming in the shadows. Seren forced herself to keep her mouth shut now, though her bottom lip trembled. Ashen Rook, the scout who dragged her here, smirked like he had caught a prize. Auric Vance, the beta, watched with wary eyes, like something didn't add up. "There is a law," Ravian said, raising his voice so all could hear. "A wolf who can speak but chooses silence commits treachery under the Wraith Tribunal, punishable by claiming, if not death." Seren's chest tightened. Claiming meant ownership. Chains. Forced bond. Her voice, her secret, was suddenly bigger than fear. It was power she never wanted. "Why stay silent?" Ravian demanded. He stepped closer, and Seren smelled pine and winter smoke on his cloak. Her breath shook. She stared at the floor. He bent down suddenly, grabbing her chin and forcing her eyes to meet his. His touch wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel. It was worse, curious. "Say something," he ordered. He wanted to hear proof. He wanted truth. Seren's throat worked painfully, memories stinging like broken glass. Her mother's scream, the burning doorway, the heavy silence afterward. She couldn't look away from him. Her voice felt buried under years of ash. Slowly, painfully, she whispered, "No." Someone gasped. A guard dropped his spear. Ravian's eyes widened, not from shock, but recognition. Like he had been searching for something, and now he'd found it. He straightened, suddenly still, like a hunter spotting movement in the dark. "Bring her to my chambers," he said. "No cells." Auric stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with respect. She deceived every pack in this realm. She might be allied with the Wraith Tribunal." Ravian didn't look away from Seren. "That makes her more valuable." 2 guards hauled her upright. Ravian leaned in, voice low and deadly serious, meant for her alone. "You thought silence could keep you from me, but I hear everything in my kingdom." Seren's legs shook as they forced her to walk. She felt every terrified heartbeat, every ancient fear rising again. The iron keep doors closed behind her with a heavy boom. Tonight, the lie that protected her was gone. And the Alpha King was not letting her disappear again. The night everything changed smelled of rain and burning cedar. Seren Caldwin was only 10 when she heard the first scream. It came from outside her window, sharp and terrified, followed by a violent crash downstairs. Her mother, Era, burst into her room, eyes wide, face streaked with soot. "No sound, Seren," she whispered, grabbing her shoulders. Her voice shook, but her grip was steady. "Not one sound. Promise me." Seren nodded, confused, barely awake. Her father, Darren, appeared next, bleeding from a cut across his forehead, holding an iron poker like a weapon. "They're here," he said. "The Wraith Tribunal found us." Seren didn't know what that meant, but the word Wraith made her blood turn cold. Era kissed her forehead once, soft and final. "Whatever happens, stay silent." The door exploded inward. A man in a dark cloak entered, his eyes like pale fog. The room filled with smoke and strangers, and everything went red. Darren fought, shouting for Seren to run, but they dragged him out by his ankles. Era clawed someone's face. She was thrown into the hall. Seren hid under her bed, shaking, biting her fist to keep from screaming. Shadows moved around her, boots stomping, voices demanding, "Where's the girl?" A sound like bones breaking echoed through the house. Then silence, abrupt, total silence. When Seren crawled out, smoke curled through the hallway like ghostly fingers. Her mother lay sprawled near the stairs, eyes open, unmoving. Seren crawled to her, hands trembling, mouth open in a scream she didn't let out. Downstairs, flames roared, turning their home into a furnace. She wanted to call for help. She wanted to shout her mother's name. Instead, she remembered. No sound. Not one. And she stayed silent. She stumbled out the back door, coughing, the night air cold against her burning skin. There was no one left. The nearest pack ignored the fire. Wolves didn't help broken families. Seren made her way to the woods, her feet bare and bleeding, her body shaking. At dawn, she was found by a traveling merchant who assumed she couldn't speak. She didn't correct him. Being quiet meant no questions, no danger. Over time, silence became armor. Years passed in the Iron Keep's shadow. No one remembered the fire. No one remembered her mother. To everyone else, Seren Caldwin was the mute girl who worked in the stables, cleaning tack, hauling buckets, and staring at the ground. She saw warriors shift to wolves, saw nobles duel in the training yard, saw Revian Soulcrest only twice in those early years, his face unreadable, his cloak trailing black fur. The first time she saw Ravian after the fire, he was not a king yet, only a commander returning wounded from battle. He passed her in the corridor of the lower barracks. She dropped an armful of bridle straps in surprise. He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Move." Nothing more. The second time, years later, his voice was different, colder, deeper, weighted. He had become king. Seren became quieter. She learned to read lips, anticipate commands, and obey without hesitation. Silence gave her invisibility, and invisibility gave her life. But rumors whispered through the keep. The Wraith Tribunal still hunted false mute wolves. Wolves who hid power behind silence, and anyone discovered would be claimed or killed. Seren slept every night with fear curled in her ribs, yet no one suspected her. Not until tonight. The last memory before the present burned brightest. Her father's voice, broken and desperate when the tribunal dragged him away. "Silence is your shield," he said. "But one day, someone will force you to speak. Run when that day comes." Seren didn't run tonight. She had whispered "stop," and Ravian Soulcrest had heard. In that single word, everything unraveled. Now, being escorted to the king's private chambers, she understood the true cost of survival. Silence had protected her for 8 years, but power, once heard, could not be unheard. She didn't know if Ravian wanted punishment, answers, or something even more dangerous. All she knew was that her voice, unwanted and terrifying, had just changed her fate, and there was no going back. The guards shoved open the heavy oak door and pushed Seren inside. Ravian Soulcrest's private chamber wasn't what she expected. No gold, no velvet, no jewels. It was stone walls, wolf pelts, maps, and weapons. A single fire crackled in a wide hearth, casting orange light over a table covered in ancient documents. Seren's feet barely made a sound on the fur rug. The door shut behind her, with a dull thud. For a moment, Ravian said nothing. He stood near the window, back turned, hands clasped behind him like someone fighting an invisible war. 8 years, he said quietly, not looking at her. I want to know why. You will speak. Seren's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to run, to claw, to hide beneath silence again. But something was shifting in Ravian's voice. Not anger. Curiosity edged with restraint. I am not patient, he added. Seren swallowed hard, forcing breath through trembling lips. Words felt like sharp stones in her mouth. Because silence saved me. Her voice cracked, weak from disuse. Ravian turned slowly, eyes narrowing, studying her face as if reading a map of scars no one else could see. Saved you from what? He asked. Seren looked at her hands. They were shaking. The Wraith Tribunal, she whispered. She expected him to laugh or call her a liar. Instead, Ravian stiffened. He walked toward her, boots whispering over the floor. You know that name, he said, tone lower, dangerous. Seren nodded. They killed my mother. His jaw clenched, not in surprise, but recognition. Auric Vance knocked once and entered with a parchment. Sir, urgent message. Ravian didn't look away from Seren. Read it. Auric frowned, eyes flicking to the girl. It's tribunal business. Auric broke the seal. Report of a missing child from the old Caldwin line, he read. Suspected traitor. Recommended action. Silence the voice permanently. Seren's blood froze. The wording was the same as that night. Ravian leaned in so close she could feel his breath. They were hunting you, he said. All this time. Seren didn't answer. She couldn't. Ravian gestured to the guards. Leave us. The door closed. Silence returned, not protective this time, but suffocating. Ravian sat at the table, motioning her forward. Sit. Seren remained standing. Her body braced for punishment. Instead, Ravian asked, Who taught you to stay silent? Seren looked at the fire, eyes burning. My father, before they took him. Ravian's expression changed, a flicker of something human. Then he was wise. A quiet stretched between them, filled with crackling fire and the distant howl of wolves beyond the walls. Ravian reached for a black leather-bound book on the table. There is an ancient law, he said. The silent oath. It says, a voice hidden in fear will one day command kings. Seren flinched. I don't want to command anything. Ravian's lips curved in a grim, knowing line. That is exactly why you are dangerous. Footsteps echoed outside. Bellamy Pride, the healer, entered without knocking, gray braids swinging. I heard, she said softly, eyes scanning Serene. You broke silence. Bellamy's voice carried strange sadness. The tribunal will smell your voice in the air now. Seren wrapped her arms around herself. Ravian nodded once. Then we move before they do. Seren stared at him, confused, afraid, hopeful. No one had ever said we about her before. Ravian stood, taking a cloak from a nearby chair. It was lined with snow wolf fur, soft but heavy. He placed it around Seren's shoulders, surprising them both. "From this moment," he said, "you will speak when I say speak, and stay silent when I say silent." Seren blinked, silence returning like instinct. "I am not claiming you," Ravian added quickly, catching her fear before she could voice it. "I am protecting you from being claimed." Bellamy stepped closer. "There is one more thing she must know," the healer murmured. Ravian nodded. Bellamy looked into Serene's eyes, voice turning grave. "Mute wolves are not broken. They are born with voices that can command packs, armies, and kings. The tribunal did not kill your family out of cruelty." Seren's heart thudded. "Then why?" Bellamy inhaled, eyes shining with something like awe and fear. "They did it because you are the one wolf on Earth they cannot control." Serene didn't sleep that night. She sat near the fire in Ravian's chamber, knees pulled to her chest beneath the heavy cloak, staring at flames dancing like memories. Bellamy Pride brewed something bitter in a black kettle, whispering old words under her breath. Ravian paced, reading faded scrolls covered in symbols Seren didn't recognize. "Your voice is not just speech," Bellamy said quietly, finally turning toward Seren. "It's command. Old command. Before kings, before alphas." Seren shook her head. "I don't want it." Bellamy smiled sadly. "Want has nothing to do with truth." The room smelled of herbs and smoke. Ravian finally stopped pacing. "The tribunal is already on the move. Auric sent scouts. We have little time." Seren's pulse thudded painfully. "So what happens now?" Ravian's eyes flashed gold. "Now we see what your voice can do." He placed a single iron cup of tea in front of her. "Drink. It will loosen what's locked." Seren hesitated. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and urgent. "Don't speak. Never speak." "They will find you," Seren whispered. "It's not safe." Ravian leaned in, his voice low but steady. "Neither is silence anymore." Seren drank. Warm, bitter liquid slid down her throat, awakening something ancient and neglected. Bellamy's fingers pressed against Seren's pulse, counting each beat. "Good," the healer murmured. "Now breathe." Ravian grabbed a small wooden bowl, setting it on the table between them. Gray ash rested inside. "This ash came from the cedar pyre, burned in the tribunal's initiation ritual," he said. "If you can move it, even a little." Seren's chest tightened. "Move it? With what?" Ravian didn't blink. "With your voice!" Bellamy nodded. "Speak a single intention." Seren's hands trembled. She breathed in, out. The air felt heavy, alive. She looked at the bowl and whispered one word. "Rise." The ash swirled. Not much, just a tremor like a breath across dust. But it moved. Seren jerked back, knocking her chair over. Bellamy gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. Ravian stared, eyes burning with something fierce and haunted. "Again," he said, voice barely controlled. Seren shook her head violently. "No." Ravian stepped closer. "Seren, that ash belonged to tribunal initiates. They trained for years to control the dead voice, and you moved it in seconds." Seren's heartbeat roared in her ears. "I don't want this," she whispered. Ravian's face hardened. "Want is irrelevant. The tribunal will kill you for it." A sudden scream outside shattered the moment. Seren jumped. Bellamy rushed to the door. Auric Vance burst in, cloak torn, breath ragged. "They're here," he said. "Wraith scouts, tracking by scent." Ravian cursed. "Too soon." Auric's eyes landed on the bowl of ash. "What did she do?" Ravian ignored him. "Pack the scrolls. We leave now." They moved through underground corridors, stone cold against Seren's bare feet, torches flickering like dying stars. Ravian led, fast and sure. Bellamy carried vials clinking softly. Auric grabbed a blade from the wall. "Where are we going?" Seren whispered, grabbing Ravian's sleeve. "Somewhere even the tribunal fears," he said. "The silent cavern." Seren didn't know what that was, but her bones shivered hearing it. The sound of wolves howling drifted closer. Too close. At a locked gate, Auric knelt, prying rusted metal loose. "They have Rook with them," he panted. "He turned his coat." Ravian's jaw tightened. "I knew." The gate finally gave way, metal screeching. The corridor beyond was narrow, dark, lined with ancient runes. Seren's throat tightened, old fear flooding back. She remembered running through smoke, through darkness, with no one. Now Ravian reached back, gripping her hand. Not gentle, not soft, but solid. They entered a cavern that felt alive. Air hummed with a strange silence, deeper than quiet, like sound itself was afraid to exist here. Bellamy lit a lantern. The walls were carved with circles, words in a forgotten language. "This place was built by mute wolves," she whispered. "Their voices were too powerful to speak above ground." Seren touched a symbol. It pulsed warm beneath her skin. Outside footsteps thundered closer. Auric barred the entrance with rock. "Ravian," he said, eyes fierce. "They won't stop. They know what she is now." Seren stood in the center of the cavern, the ash bowl still clutched in her shaking hands. Ravian stepped toward her, gaze intense. "You are not broken," he said. "You are not prey. You are a storm taught to whisper." Seren looked back, fear and strength battling in her chest. "What do I do?" Ravian leaned close until his breath brushed her ear. "You learn to speak, and make the world listen." Dawn came like fire spilling over the jagged cliffs outside the silent cavern. Seren Caldwin sat on a smooth stone ledge, knees drawn to her chest, hands trembling. The ash from last night lay in a small iron bowl before her, now lifeless, but her pulse carried the memory of its movement. Bellamy Pride whispered softly, circling her like a careful predator. "You felt it," she said, voice almost reverent. "You moved something no one in generations could." Seren shook her head. "It wasn't me," she whispered, the words foreign in her mouth. "It just happened." Bellamy studied her, eyes grave. "It is you. Every silent wolf has a voice like this. Every mute girl who hides for fear is hiding a storm. And the storm is awake." Ravian Soulcrest, leaning against a jagged wall, arms crossed, said nothing. But the gold in his eyes gleamed like a warning. The sunlight streaking through the cavern only highlighted the tension between them. Silence stretched, heavy as stone, until Seren's voice trembled again. "They'll come for me." Outside, the wind carried distant howls. Not ordinary wolves, something darker, purposeful. Auric Vance paced near the entrance, blade in hand. "They are close," he said. "The Wraith Tribunal moves faster than shadows." Seren swallowed hard, the fear she had buried for 8 years resurfacing like ice in her veins. Ravian approached her, slow and deliberate. "Then you have no choice," he said. "You must speak. Not just words, but your power. If you hide, they will find you and kill you. If you show them what you are, they will hesitate or break." Seren shook her head violently. "I can't," she whispered, panic rising. "I've survived this long. I can't control it." Ravian knelt, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You survived by hiding. Now you survive by standing. The world cannot ignore you anymore." His gaze bore into her, unyielding, golden, and feral, yet with a strange glimmer of trust. Bellamy knelt beside the ash, picking it up and sprinkling it in a perfect circle on the cavern floor. "The first words are always the hardest," she murmured. "You must focus your intent. The ash will respond." Seren stared at the black specks trembling in the sunlight, fear clawing at her throat. She closed her eyes, remembering her mother's warning, her father's trembling words, and every silent year she had endured. A single thought anchored her: survival. Her throat worked painfully as she whispered, almost inaudible, "Rise." The ash lifted slightly, drifting as if caught by invisible hands. Her eyes flew open. The ash, tiny grains at first, began to swirl faster, forming a miniature vortex in the air. Bellamy gasped. Auric took a step back. Even Ravian's lips parted, a brief flicker of awe crossing his face. "Yes," he said quietly. "Now you see. It obeys your intent. You are the storm." The sound of distant howls grew louder. Shadows moved against the cliffs outside, unnervingly human in motion. "They know," Auric said, tension tightening his shoulders. "They can sense the echo of her voice." Bellamy turned to Seren, gripping her shoulders. "You are ready for them, but you must choose hide or strike before they find you." Seren's heart thundered. The words felt like jagged stones in her mouth. She was terrified. She wanted to retreat to silence, the one refuge that had kept her alive. But the swirl of ash, the way the air hummed with her power, showed her another path. She could fight. She could survive. She could be heard. Slowly, she whispered again, louder this time. "Rise!" The ash erupted into a small whirlwind, spinning faster, as though mocking gravity itself. Ravian stepped closer, murmuring, "This is only the beginning." His eyes softened, just slightly, acknowledging the bravery it took to speak, to claim the voice she had hidden for years. A sound from the cavern entrance made them all tense. Shadows elongated as the first tribunal scouts crested the cliffs, moving with the precision of predators. Auric readied his blade. "They are coming," he muttered. Ravian's lips curved in a dangerous smile. "Then show me what you can do," he commanded. Seren's throat tightened. Her hands shook. She lifted them over the spinning ash, her body trembling with fear and anticipation. She inhaled, trying to center herself, focus her mind, summon what she had hidden for 8 years. The wind in the cavern seemed to respond, swirling with the ash in miniature tornadoes. "Come," she whispered, voice stronger than ever. The words hung in the air, vibrating with power. The ash spun violently, and for the first time the cavern seemed to tremble. Outside, the scouts halted, unease rippling through their movements. The silent oath was awakening in her. For the first time in 8 years, Seren Caldwin understood that silence was no longer protection. It was the cage she had to break. And Ravian Soulcrest was the only one who could help her break it. The sound of hooves echoed against the jagged cliffs as Ravian led Seren and the others through a hidden path beyond the silent cavern. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and for the first time in 8 years, Seren felt the weight of the outside world pressing against her. She had survived silence. Now she would have to survive attention. Every shadow seemed to watch her. Every leaf and rock whispered danger. Ravian moved with effortless precision, his cloak snapping like black wings in the wind. "The tribunal scouts are fast," he said, voice low, eyes scanning the horizon. "If they sense your presence, they will not hesitate." Auric Vance rode beside her, blade ready, silent as a shadow. Bellamy Pride followed with vials and herbs strapped to her belt. Seren's pulse pounded, the echo of her whispered power still humming in her chest. She had learned she could move the ash, the air itself bending to her will. But outside, with predators circling, the stakes were terrifyingly real. They reached a narrow valley shrouded in mist. Ravens circled overhead, cawing warnings that only heightened Seren's tension. "This is where they hunt," Ravian murmured, "and where you fight." His eyes softened slightly as they met hers, but the warning in them remained sharp. He dismounted, landing silently, and gestured for Seren to follow. She obeyed, legs stiff, hands trembling, clutching the cloak he had given her. Every step through the mist felt like walking through a dream she didn't want to have. Then movement, dark shapes flitting through the fog. The tribunal scouts. They didn't see her yet, but they smelled the air, tense with power. One moved closer to where she hid behind a jagged rock, sniffing as if aware of a storm in hiding. Seren froze, heart hammering, remembering all the years she had kept silent. Now silence would not save her. Revian stepped forward, his presence like a shield of shadows. "Do not fear them," he said, his voice low, authoritative. "Use them." Seren swallowed. Could she really use her power this way? She focused, feeling the air vibrate with intention. Slowly, almost tentatively, she whispered, "Bind." A shiver went through her as the fog thickened unnaturally, curling around the scouts like invisible chains. They stumbled, confused, blades swinging blindly as the wind became a tangible force. Auric and Ravian moved in unison, cutting and disarming, while Bellamy prepared herbs to immobilize the wounded. Seren's voice had broken the balance, bending reality in subtle, terrifying ways. She had not just spoken. She had commanded, and the tribunal felt it. Each whispered word was no longer a survival tactic. It was a weapon. The battle escalated quickly, shadows leapt, swords clashed, and the fog thickened with Seren's power. One scout lunged at her, eyes wide, teeth bared in wolfish form. But she didn't scream. She whispered, "Stop!" The world obeyed. His body froze mid-lunge, suspended as if time had caught him. Auric took him down silently. Bellamy clutched her staff tightly, eyes fixed on Seren. Ravian's gaze never left her. "Good," he said quietly, voice a low growl of approval. "Do you see now? Fear is not your shield. It is your weapon when honed." Seren's chest heaved. The exhilaration of power coursed through her, mixed with terror. For 8 years, silence had protected her. Now speaking was survival and defiance, and she felt an unfamiliar thrill in wielding it. As the sun rose, burning the fog into golden streaks, the valley was littered with unconscious tribunal scouts, tied with spectral chains of air. Seren collapsed to her knees, shaking, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of having broken through her old self. Ravian knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her back. "You are ready," he said, voice low, almost a whisper meant for her ears alone. "The tribunal won't forget this. Neither will your enemies. And neither will I." Her chest tightened. "I don't know if I want this," she murmured. Ravian's eyes softened with a glimmer of understanding. "Then learn to want it," he said, "or learn to survive without fear. Both paths are dangerous, but one of them is yours to claim." For the first time in years, Seren Caldwin felt that the world saw her. Not the mute girl in the stables. Not the frightened child hiding in shadows. She was a storm, alive and unbroken. And Ravian Soulcrest had not just discovered her secret. He had awakened it. And the hunt had only just begun. The aftermath of the valley battle left Seren both exhilarated and terrified. The fog had lifted, revealing the rugged cliffs and jagged rocks of the borderlands, where the sun struck cold against their skin. She had tasted power, and the memory made her pulse thrum as if her heart had grown wings. Ravian rode silently beside her, cloak billowing in the wind. His eyes, golden and sharp, tracked every shadow that moved along the ridges. "The tribunal will regroup," he said quietly, his voice low but commanding. "They'll come again, faster and smarter." Auric rode ahead, scanning the paths for traps, while Bellamy followed, eyes wary. Seren's hands clenched the reins of her horse. Every instinct screamed to hide, to flee into the familiar armor of silence. But her voice, once spoken, now pulsed in her veins. She had tasted the strength hidden behind her muted years, and hiding felt impossible. Still, fear lingered, a shadow at the edges of her mind, whispering old warnings of her mother's death, her father's absence, and the tribunal's relentless pursuit. As they descended into the valley below, they reached an abandoned settlement, stone huts broken by time and moss. Ravian dismounted, gestures sharp and deliberate. "We rest here," he said, "but not long." The settlement was eerily silent, with the wind whistling through crumbling windows and doors swinging on rusted hinges. Seren moved cautiously, sensing every creak, every whisper of air. Bellamy knelt near a small fire pit, arranging herbs and vials for protection and healing. Oryx circled the perimeter, blade reflecting the sun's glare. Seren's thoughts drifted to the ash bowl, still tucked in her satchel. She pulled it out, trembling, and watched it like a mirror to her own hidden power. "You are not alone," Ravian said suddenly, startling her. "The world may have ignored you for 8 years, but not me. You are mine to guide, not claim, yet mine in another way entirely." His words made her heart twist in confusion, and something unfamiliar. Desire. Night fell, shadows stretching long over the ruins. A wolf howl echoed from the nearby forest, deeper and more haunting than any Seren had heard before. It was not a lone wolf. It was a call, a signal. Ravian stiffened, drawing his sword. "They are near," he said, voice low, almost a growl. Seren swallowed hard, feeling her voice stir like an untamed flame. She had learned to move ash and air, but could she command wolves? Could she defend herself without silence as her shield? A figure emerged from the tree line, Juniper Veilheart, a raven-haired warrior known for tracking tribunal movements. She bowed slightly, cautious. "You are stronger than they expected," Juniper whispered. "But strength alone won't save her. Secrets of the Silent Oath run deep, and the tribunal hunts what they cannot control." Seren's stomach twisted. The tribunal had always been a shadow in her past. Now they were tangible, breathing, real, and closing in. Ravian studied Juniper carefully. "Tell me everything you know," he demanded. Juniper's eyes flickered toward Seren. "The Silent Oath," she began, "binds the voice of mute wolves. It is not just a shield, it is a prison. Any who break it can command elements, minds, even other wolves. They feared her kind. They still do." Seren's hands shook. For 8 years she had hidden, pretending weakness. Now she was not weak. She was hunted. And the secret of her lineage had made her a beacon, a target. Ravian's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. "Then we must protect it, at all costs, and teach her to wield it before the tribunal arrives." Oryx stepped closer. "It won't be easy. They've seen her power. They won't stop." The forest around them stirred. Whispering shadows danced in the moonlight, and the air carried the scent of danger. Seren realized that this night would test everything she had learned. Survival, power, and trust were now intertwined, and the Alpha King beside her was both her shield and her fiercest challenge. Bellamy knelt beside her, whispering words of preparation, herbs clutched tightly. "Your voice can bind or destroy," she said. "Tonight it must defend. Fear will sharpen it if you let it. Silence is gone." Seren's pulse raced as she looked at the dark tree line. She could see the faint shimmer of movement, figures cloaked in black, the first true strike of the tribunal in years. Her throat burned with anticipation and fear. She remembered her first whispered command over the ash, and now her intention was clear. No longer a mute girl hiding in shadows, no longer a prey of fate. She was a wolf awakened, her voice a storm waiting to break. Ravian's hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her. "We fight together," he said. "Do not doubt. Do not falter. You are Seren Caldwin, and they will know your name tonight." The wind howled through the ruins, carrying their impending battle across the valley. The hunt had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The first attack came just before midnight, a shadow moving faster than thought across the ruins. Seren's pulse spiked as she crouched behind a broken wall, eyes wide, sensing. Rather than seeing the figures in black cloaks slipping toward them, the wind carried faint whispers, ancient words of power meant to disorient. Auric Vance had already positioned himself near the entrance, blade gleaming, muscles coiled. Bellamy Pride muttered protective chants under her breath, fingers tracing sigils in the air. Ravian Soulcrest stood at the center, cloak swirling like a dark halo, sword drawn. He motioned for Seren to stay low. Her heart thundered in her chest. 8 years of silence had taught her to disappear. Now her voice would become both weapon and beacon, and the tribunal knew it. A sudden shimmer of movement, the lead scout lunged forward, eyes glowing pale, fangs bared. Seren's throat worked instinctively. She whispered, "Halt!" The air around the figure thickened, almost liquid, forcing him to freeze mid-leap. Auric moved with deadly precision, cutting him down without a sound. Another scout charged from the side. Seren's breath came in shallow bursts. She whispered again, this time louder. "Stop!" The figure skidded to a halt, stumbling as if invisible chains bound him. Bellamy gasped, stepping closer. "Do not underestimate them," she warned. "Even immobilized, their presence feeds the tribunal's network. They will call reinforcements if we linger." Ravian's eyes glinted like molten gold. "Then we end this quickly. Seren, focus. Let your voice guide them, not just stop them." The next wave of attackers surged from the shadows, faster and more coordinated. Seren could feel their intentions, their fear, and their cunning. She closed her eyes, whispering commands with precision. "Turn back! Yield!" Each word carried weight, bending the air, twisting shadows into barriers. Several scouts fell to the ground, bodies rigid as if time itself had slowed. Ravian fought beside her with lethal grace, blade cutting through the chaos. Auric moved like a shadow, striking with silent efficiency. Even Bellamy, with herbs and incantations, became an extension of Seren's power, creating wards that shivered in the cold night air. The ruins trembled as if recognizing her command, amplifying her voice, making her whispers roar like the winds of a storm. She could feel her old fear clawing at her chest, threatening to silence her again. But she did not yield. Silence was no longer her ally. In the midst of the battle, a shadow separated from the group, a larger figure, cloaked in deep crimson. Cedric Thornfall, rival Alpha allied with the tribunal, emerged, eyes sharp and calculating. He laughed, a low sound that carried across the ruins. "So, the mute girl speaks," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "The king thinks he can protect you?" Ravian growled, stepping in front of Seren, sword raised. "Leave her," he commanded. Cedric smirked. "Or what? You think your little storm will stop the tribunal?" He lunged faster than any human should, claws extended, intent lethal. Seren's hands shook, breath ragged, yet instinct guided her. She whispered, "Bind him!" A tangible force shot from her chest, wrapping around Cedric like iron threads. He froze mid-attack, eyes wide, struggling against the invisible grip. Ravian's blade struck, but it was Seren's power that held him. She felt the first true surge of exhilaration, power no longer hidden, command no longer silent. She was no longer prey. When the final scout fell, silence returned to the valley, broken only by the heavy breaths of the victors. Cedric Thornfall, immobilized, glared at Seren, hatred burning in his gaze. "This isn't over," he spat, struggling uselessly. Ravian lowered his sword slowly, eyes fixed on her. You have done well, he said, voice a growl of admiration. They underestimated the storm behind silence. Auric sheathed his blade, nodding sharply. Bellamy placed a hand on Seren's shoulder, her eyes filled with awe and something like pride. The victory was hard won, but Seren felt it in every fiber of her being. Her voice had saved them all. 8 years of hiding, trembling, and silence had led to this moment. The tribunal had struck, and for the first time Seren Caldwin realized that survival was no longer about being unseen. It was about being powerful, feared, and heard. Ravian's hand brushed hers, brief but grounding. You are not alone, he murmured. And you will never be silent again. The wind swept across the ruins, carrying her name into the night, and for the first time in 8 years, it felt like a promise. Dawn broke over the cliffs in sharp ribbons of gold and crimson, revealing the valley strewn with the unconscious bodies of tribunal scouts. Seren Caldwin's hands still trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the realization of what she had done. Her voice, once hidden, once feared, had shaped reality, bending warriors, shadows, and the very wind to her will. Ravian's soul crest stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon, every muscle taut with alertness. He did not speak immediately, letting the weight of the night's victory settle over them. Auric Vance and Bellamy Pride moved quietly among the fallen, ensuring none would rise again too soon. Seren's heart hammered with every thought. 8 years of silence had brought her here, to a battlefield where her voice was no longer a secret, where the world had finally heard her. And yet, fear lingered. The tribunal was relentless, and Cedric Thornfall had escaped, hatred burning in his eyes. They would return, stronger and faster. Ravian's hand brushed hers, a grounding touch in the chaos. You understand now, he said quietly, voice low and intimate, why I did not leave you behind. Why I insisted you speak. Seren's throat worked, trying words she barely recognized in the air. I didn't mean to control them. Ravian shook his head, expression softening with a rare, fleeting warmth. You didn't control them. You protected us. You protected yourself. And that is far more than most wolves could do. The valley seemed to hold its breath, as if the stones themselves recognized the weight of her awakening. Bellamy's eyes glimmered with something reverent. Seren, the silent oath, you have fulfilled it in ways few ever could. The tribunal knows now. They will come for you, but you are ready. Fear and awe warred in Seren's chest, her silent years crashing against the roar of her newfound power. The sound of wings cutting the morning air drew their attention. From the ridge above, a wolf the size of a horse, black as midnight, with eyes like molten gold, landed silently. Ravian gestured and it approached him without fear. It is time, he said. Time for the claim. Seren's stomach twisted. She had spent years running, hiding, surviving, pretending weakness. And now? Ravian's words carried weight she could not ignore. Claim? She whispered, the word tasting strange on her tongue. Yes, Ravian said. Not as possession, but as bond. You are no longer just a survivor. You are an alpha in your own right. And I will stand with you, beside you, to protect what you have become. To honor the power you never wanted. Her chest tightened, fear mixing with a curious warmth. 8 years of hiding, of pretending, of muteness had led her here, to a choice she had never imagined, to remain alone, or to stand with the Alpha King who had awakened her. Cedric Thornfall appeared suddenly, emerging from the cliffs, eyes blazing, claws extended. You will regret this, he spat, voice echoing across the valley. Ravian stepped forward, sword raised, shadows pooling like a cloak of darkness. Seren felt the storm inside her rise, the ash from last night igniting in her chest. She lifted her hands, whispering words that made the wind twist violently. Cedric froze mid-leap, then fell backward as invisible threads bound him to the earth. Ravian moved with lethal precision, but it was Seren's command that held him. The tribunal had underestimated her, underestimated the girl who had survived 8 years in silence, and now she was no longer afraid. Her voice, once hidden, was an instrument of justice. Cedric struggled, rage and disbelief written across his face, but the invisible chains did not falter. "This ends now," Ravian growled, stepping beside her, sword gleaming in the morning sun. After the last scout was subdued, the valley fell silent again, this time by choice rather than fear. Seren sank to her knees, breath heaving, eyes wide with the intensity of what she had done. Ravian knelt beside her, brushing a hand across her hair. "You did not just survive," he said softly. "You commanded. You protected. You are no longer a shadow in silence. You are Seren Caldwin, voice unbroken, storm awakened." Tears pricked her eyes, not from pain, but from release. 8 years of hiding, of muteness, of pretending weakness, was over. The tribunal would remember her now, yes, but so would the world, and for the first time she felt power, respect, and a strange, tender bond with the Alpha King who had seen her truth. He extended his hand, and she took it, standing beside him, not as prey, not as mute, but as a force that could no longer be ignored. The wind swept across the cliffs, carrying her name into the world, fierce, unyielding, and free. And for the first time in years, Seren Caldwin smiled, knowing she had found her voice, her strength, and her place, beside the Alpha King who had awakened her, not to claim her, but to stand as her equal. Weeks passed after the battle in the valley, yet Seren Caldwin could not forget the weight of the tribunal's gaze, or the echo of her own voice commanding life and death. The silent cavern had become their sanctuary, a place where she practiced, honed, and tested the limits of the power that had lain dormant for 8 years. Ash swirled beneath her fingertips, responding to the subtlest whisper, the gentlest thought. Ravian's soul crest never left her side, not as a guard, but as a partner, a teacher, and a silent constant. He spoke little, letting her voice lead, guiding her when she faltered, pushing her when fear threatened to overwhelm. Each day she grew stronger, her confidence radiating like the first sun after a storm. The valley was quiet now, the tribunal scattered, their confidence shaken. For the first time, Seren realized that her years of silence had been preparation for this. Survival, not as a shadow, but as a storm. One crisp morning, the wind carried scents she had long avoided. Wildflowers, pine, and the faint trace of smoke from distant fires. Ravian stood beside her on a cliff overlooking the forest below. "You've learned control," he said, voice low, almost hesitant. "And yet, there is more to this power than strength. There is purpose." Seren gazed at the valley, remembering the first time she had spoken. Her heart tightened at the memory of fear, exhilaration, and unrelenting tension. "I never wanted this," she admitted, voice soft but steady. "I only wanted to survive." Ravian's gaze softened, golden eyes meeting hers. "Survival is the first step. But now, you choose. Your voice can heal, protect, and command." 8 years of silence were not wasted. They were the foundation for what you were always meant to become. A gentle warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, survival and purpose felt entwined, and fear, though present, no longer controlled her. The Alpha King reached for her hand, the gesture deliberate, grounding, intimate. "Seren," he whispered, "you are no longer mute. You are no longer alone. And you are no longer prey. You are a wolf awakened, a force the world must acknowledge. Will you stand with me, not as someone to be claimed, but as my equal?" Seren's throat worked as emotions she had buried for years rose, fear, relief, pride, and something tender and unfamiliar. Trust. 8 years of hiding, of muteness, had prepared her for this moment, and she felt ready to embrace it. Yes, she whispered, voice firm, carrying across the cliff. The wind caught it, carrying it into the valley, into the forests, into the world beyond the tribunal's reach. Her voice was no longer silent, no longer hidden. It was alive. It was hers. And it was unbreakable. Later that day, Cedric Thornfall returned alone, seeking vengeance. But he underestimated not only Seren's command, but the strength of her bond with Ravian. The battle was brief and decisive. Cedric fell to the edge of the valley, subdued by invisible threads of air and ash, powerless before the storm Seren had become. "Let him go," Ravian said quietly, eyes on Seren. She hesitated, feeling the thrill of retribution and the weight of justice. Then she whispered a single word, calm but absolute. "Release." The threads dissolved and Cedric scrambled away, broken but alive. "Mercy," she murmured, surprise in her own tone. Ravian's gaze softened. "Power is only as noble as the choices it shapes," he said. Seren nodded, understanding finally that control was not just about force. It was about wisdom, restraint, and intention. That evening the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting the silent cavern in hues of amber and violet. Seren stood at the cliff edge, wind whipping her hair around her face, and looked at the Alpha King beside her. 8 years, she whispered almost to herself. I hid and survived. And now I speak. Ravian stepped closer, brushing a hand along her back, protective and warm. "And now the world listens," he said softly. The first stars appeared, glimmering above the valley like watchful eyes. Seren felt a calm she had never known. Her past, her fear, her silence, all transformed into something powerful, unyielding. She had survived, she had commanded, and she had chosen her path. And in Ravian Soulcrest, she had found not a captor, but an equal, a partner in a world that would no longer ignore her. The storm of her voice, once hidden for 8 years, had finally settled. And in its place, Seren Caldwin stood, unbroken, seen, and free. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Which part of Seren's journey moved you the most? Her years of silence, the moment she first spoke, or the battle against the tribunal? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, evening in Paris. I want to know. If you loved this story and want to see more werewolf romances filled with secrets, danger, and powerful voices, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. And one last thing, share this video with a friend who loves epic love stories, because Seren's journey is the kind of tale you won't want to keep to yourself. The storm is over, for now. But the next adventure could be closer than you think.